Narcissism is a word that seems to be flying around loosely these days, sometimes a little too loosely. As soon as one person gets upset or acts a bit selfish in a certain situation, they are deemed a narcissist and abusive. But the thing is that we all have some degree of narcissism within us, which does not necessarily make us abusive or narcissists. And then we have the pathological narcissist who can turn your whole life upside down, destroying everything on your path. So in today's video, I decided to take a look at the non-pathological, then the pathological. Well, I'll try anyway. So here we go. Narcissism exists on a spectrum, and it doesn't always have to be pathological or harmful. People can exhibit narcissistic traits without meeting the clinical definition of narcissistic personality disorder, NPD, which is much more extreme. You might be in relationships with people, be it friendships or intimate, and because all of the talk on narcissism these days, you could be mistaken in thinking that this person is toxic and beyond help or change. Or maybe you've already experienced a toxic, abusive relationship, and now every person that you meet appears to be a narcissist, and you keep yourself at a distance or in harsh judgment. So before you decide to end these relationships too abruptly or to avoid them, let's take a look at the different degrees of narcissism, ranging from mild to pronounced, to clarify, and then I'll give some examples to illustrate them. The first one is you have healthy narcissism, which is self-confidence and self-respect. And this is the least extreme form of narcissism and is often a healthy sense of self-worth. People with healthy narcissism have a solid sense of who they are, a high level of self-esteem, and a belief in their own abilities. But they aren't egocentric or manipulative. So, for example, a successful entrepreneur who knows their strengths and feels confident in their abilities, but is also able to listen to feedback, appreciate the contributions of others, and remain humble. They don't need constant praise or validation, but they feel good about their accomplishments. We're often taught growing up that it isn't okay to gloat, that somehow it makes us bad and we should be ashamed of that. But there is nothing wrong with being excited about an accomplishment. As long as it doesn't go to your head, you can be happy for yourself. You worked for this. We have the right to let our light shine. And when it comes to toxic relationships, they tend to dim our lights. Number two, we have grandiose narcissism, which is the exaggerated self-image. Now, grandiose narcissism involves an inflated sense of self-importance, but it's typically still manageable and doesn't lead to destructive behaviors. People here often have a strong need to be admired, and they might exaggerate their achievements or talents. However, they can still engage in healthy relationships and show empathy when needed. An example of that is a person who constantly talks about their successes, may even embellish some stories to sound more impressive, but they're generally charming, charismatic, and they still show respect to others when they feel it's necessary. They might enjoy being the center of attention, but they're not malicious. And that can stem from someone who doesn't feel good about themselves to some degree or interesting enough to hold someone's attention, so they embellish things. That's the way they survive that pain or the fear that they're in, by embellishing their experiences. The third one is communal narcissism. Communal narcissists seek validation and admiration not through personal achievements or wealth, but through their perceived good deeds, their kindness, or their moral superiority. They want to be seen as compassionate and selfless. And while they often genuinely want to help, there's an underlying expectation of recognition. For example, a person who is very involved in charity work or helping others, but they often make sure to mention their contributions or make sure that their name is associated with the cause. So they enjoy the admiration for their good deeds, but they're not necessarily toxic in their approach to others. They can be a bit off-putting, but the goal is never to bring another down in order to be lifted up. Number four, vulnerable narcissism, fragile self esteem and sensitivity. Vulnerable narcissists have a low sense of self worth and are often highly sensitive to criticism or rejection. While they crave admiration or attention, their need is driven more by insecurity than by a grandiose view of themselves. They really feel insecure and they need others to help them not feel so insecure. They often feel misunderstood and they can react defensively when their self esteem is threatened. For example, an artist who seeks validation for their work but feels deeply hurt if they don't receive praise. They might exaggerate their vulnerability or isolate themselves after not getting the recognition that they desire. But they aren't generally malicious towards others. Their narcissism is more rooted in their insecurities. You'll often see them as the forever victim. Life is always unfair. It's the poor me attitude, and it's never their fault. And you often feel drained after spending time with them, listening to their forever complaints. But that doesn't necessarily make them evil people who can't change. Sometimes they just need a shift in perspective or a willingness to grow or to have hit a wall a few times, one time too many, and then they're willing to change. Number five, we have adaptive narcissism, which is strategic self promotion. Some individuals exhibit narcissistic traits as a strategic approach to success, often using self promotion in a healthy way to get ahead in their careers or their social lives. These individuals are usually well aware of their image and they know how to project themselves confidently in various situations, but they don't necessarily expect excessive admiration. For example, a public speaker is able to promote their achievements and personal brand, understanding that it helps them advance in their career. While they might emphasize their accomplishments and wear the best suits and always look the best, which is not their real life, right? But their goal isn't to manipulate others, but to maintain their position and reputation in a competitive field. But in all these cases, narcissistic traits exist without necessarily leading to harm or manipulation. People with these degrees of narcissism can sometimes come across as self centered or self important, but they don't meet the criteria for narcissistic personality disorder, where the traits would significantly impact their relationship or day to day functioning. The key difference is that in non pathological narcissism, the person is still capable of self reflection, empathy, and maintaining healthy relationships. They can desire admiration or recognition, but their behavior, it doesn't involve exploitation or a lack of concern for others' well being. Now, when we talk about the pathological narcissist or pathological narcissism, we're looking at NPD, Narcissistic Personality Disorder. And do take note, though, that you can't go around stating that your partner or whoever you believe has narcissistic personality disorder, because that gets diagnosed by a professional. But you can definitely go around thinking it in your head. You know, right? You don't need a diagnosis to determine whether or not to stay in a relationship. Pathological narcissism refers to a more extreme and dysfunctional form of narcissism. It isn't necessarily a distinct type of narcissism, but rather a way to describe the level of severity and dysfunction exhibited by a narcissist. When people refer to pathological narcissism, they are usually talking about narcissism that has reached a level where it significantly impacts someone's ability to function in healthy relationships and in society. They can't keep jobs, they can't keep relationships. Pathological narcissism refers to a severe and maladaptive pattern of narcissistic behavior. It's a term often used to describe narcissism that crosses the threshold into being a personality disorder. It involves a chronic, pervasive sense of grandiosity, entitlement, and a lack of empathy, and often includes behaviors like manipulation, exploitation, and emotional abuse. It significantly impacts relationships and daily functioning. Individuals with pathological narcissism often have difficulty maintaining healthy relationship and can cause harm to others due to their self-centered, exploitative, and entitled behaviors. They might also experience significant emotional distress due to their own inability to connect. They can never have real relationships. They believe that they are superior to others, deserving of special treatment, or that they are unique in ways that others can't understand. They believe that they're entitled to privileges, special treatment, or resources that others might not receive. And this often leads them to expect others to cater to their needs or desires without question. It's an unquestionable expectation. The lack of empathy is really noticeable. They don't care how you feel. For example, they're often irresponsible in their driving behaviors. They have this need for control in the car. They'll exhibit road rage or drive recklessly to assert dominance or provoke others to scare others. And it won't matter who's in the vehicle with them and how afraid they are. There isn't any thought nor care as to how the other is feeling. Their driving is a good metaphor for how they approach life, needing to control situations, dominate spaces, and assert superiority. And boy, talk about dominating spaces, they dominate spaces. Pay attention. They take everything from you. The pathological narcissists will use others as tools to achieve their own goals without any regard to the other person. They exploit people for emotional, financial, or social gain. They engage in emotional abuse, which can include belittling, gaslighting, name calling, or other cruel behaviors aimed at controlling or diminishing the self esteem of others. It's done intentional. And because of their lack of empathy, they don't form deep, trusting, and mutual supportive relationships. They have superficial interactions. There's no real emotional connection. So they're empty shells. They continually hurt others with zero apologies for their behaviors, no accountability. They put their own needs and desires ahead of others, and this can harm friends, family, and coworkers, and does. They're explosive. They act defensively, angrily, or even with rage when criticized. They don't tolerate feedback that challenges their inflated sense of self worth. They're just not open to growth. And this makes it really, really hard on the partner to be able to feel free to speak, to live. Let's take a look at the impact on daily functioning. Pathological narcissism affects different areas of life, such as work, friendships, and family life. Because these individuals are often exploitative and dismissive of others, their actions lead to conflicts, job issues, or strained personal relationships. Narcissistic abuse can and has profound and lasting effects on victims, especially the ones in intimate relationships, impacting almost all, if not all, areas of the person's life. The constant microaggressions. They hurt their partners over and over and over and over again. Victims often struggle with emotional and psychological trauma, including feelings of confusion, anxiety, and depression. Their self esteem can be severely damaged, leading to a lack of self worth or identity. Daily tasks can feel overwhelming because they often doubt their own decisions and have trouble trusting their own judgment due to the constant manipulation and gaslighting that they experience. Victims might also face difficulty in maintaining healthy relationships or setting boundaries, as narcissistic abuse often erodes their sense of what healthy dynamics look like. They often experience chronic stress or emotional exhaustion, and some even develop PTSD or complex PTSD. Over time, these effects can infiltrate their personal, their professional, and social lives, making it harder to feel secure, focused, or even fully present in daily activities. They're walking around life like zombies. Healing from such horrible abuse typically requires long term therapy and support. So, I will leave it at that in hopes that you can differentiate a bit better here between the non pathological and maybe not look over your shoulder so much, and then the pathological. For those who are with a pathological, know this: when you are being harmed by another, be it emotional, mental, or physical, and these are not people who are willing nor wanting to change, then perhaps it's time to walk, because that isn't love. Take care, and we shall see you in the next video. Bye for now.